Hey everyone, it's Dylan from the Black Forest Wood Company, and we're back at this client's house for the third time. You've already seen us build this custom door and a custom dining table, and today we're going to be putting in 10 custom walnut chairs. So let's go in and take a look. So before we show you the way that this house came together, we want to walk you through the process of constructing these chairs. So it's not our first time building chairs like this, but this was our largest order we've ever had for chairs of this nature. So we used our SCM sliding panel saw to actually cut these down to size, and that SCM machine has been an incredible piece of equipment for us, and we're very excited to announce that we have a new piece coming from them probably in March. It's going to be our 54-inch helical planar sander. So these are very, very labor intensive chairs for us to create. And they are inspired by Sam Maloof, and Sam Maloof happens to be one of my biggest personal inspirations. His claim to fame, I guess, is for his chairs, specifically his joinery is what got really popular, and also his rocking chairs. He invented this style of joinery for connecting chair legs onto the chair seat that is beautiful, but also extremely, extremely strong, and that has been proven by his chairs, some of them being, I think, like 50 or 60 years old and still out there. Now it's time to head over to the CNC machine to begin breaking down our rough blanks into the size of the chair legs. Now, even though we're using a CNC machine here, this is only doing about half of the work that it's going to take to get these chair legs to their final shape. Our machine is only a 3-axis machine, so it can move in X, Y, and Z, but nowhere really in between. Whereas if we had a 5-axis machine, that would allow us to sculpt all of the curved components that we need. But since we don't have it, we're kind of doing it the old-fashioned way. Which I guess really isn't that old-fashioned, because Sam Maloof probably didn't have a CNC machine to break his chair legs down into their rough shape, but hey, we're using what we got. Once all of those legs have been rough machined on the CNC, we get them all laid out, and then it's time to get that Maloof joinery cut that I talked about earlier. So after the initial machining of it, we're still using some hand tools like a chisel and a router to clean up any of those imperfections, just to make sure we have the joinery fitting perfect on every single chair. Now this is where I've mentioned earlier that if we had a 5-axis CNC machine, we could save some of our labor, but we don't. So we have to manually route on a lot of these curves, and even from there, there's still a lot of filing and hand sanding that has to take place afterwards to get everything looking nice and even. And here's a perfect example of that. So we're using just a small bit on our Dremel to clean up into those tight corners where we couldn't usually get with a sander. Once we've got the legs prepped and ready for assembly, it's time to begin putting the seats together for these chairs. We're also using the same rustic walnut on these seats just to get a nice matching grain between all of the components. And then once we've got everything glued up and popped out of the clamps, we can follow the same process of cutting these down to their rough size on our SCM sliding panel saw and then getting them over to the CNC machine. These seats are going to have a sculpted surface on them, kind of to form to the shape of our client's butt, so it's more comfortable when you're sitting in it. But we're not going to have the wood grain exposed in the end. You'll see that later in the video. We're going to machine our sculpted surface in, we're going to cover it in foam and leather, and that's what's going to be the finished product. Once the blank is on the machine is first going to grab just a straight bit to kind of rough out and hog out a lot of that material that is going to be in the way, and we don't need to really worry about it. Nice fine finished surface. And then once we're done the roughing step with the straight bit, then the machine will go along and grab the ball nose, because this is going to give a much cleaner surface. It takes a lot longer. As you can see, there's many more passes involved with the ball nose bit, but it's just going to save the amount of sanding that we have to do afterwards. And then after half an hour of machining to get the seat sculpted and the joinery cut, we can go back to the hand tools to clean everything up and get these seats ready for their assembly. There's a few steps that we have to do prior to assembly, because once we get the legs in there, we're no longer going to be able to reach a router bit in some of these areas. So that's what Garrett's doing right now. He's just putting a rounded edge on all of those top and bottom surfaces, and then once this is complete, we can begin preparing for the assembly. Now, this part of the process can be a little stressful. These chairs have a lot of very specific dimensions and measurements on them, so it's important during the assembly process to be double and triple checking all of your measurements while you're going through it, because it's quite easy with, let's say, the wrong clamping pressure or a leg that's supposed to go on the left swap to the right, it's quite easy to get some of your angles off a little bit. So once we get everything clamped in, we're measuring, making sure it looks okay, and then we can finally proceed and get those clamps on. We are using Titebond 3 for the assembly of the joinery on these pieces here. We likely could have gotten away with Titebond 2, but because this is going to be, I guess you could say, the weak point on the chair where all of the stress is going to end up, we wanted to do whatever we could to over-engineer this joint and make it as strong as possible. Once we've got some of those joints cleaned up on the seat and leg connection, we can begin looking at installing the backrest. This is also something that was machined out on our CNC machine, and then from there we use our SCM sliding panel saw and a flush trim bit on a router to release the headrest from the blank. And then once we've got it removed from the blank, we can go back onto the CNC machine where it gets fastened into a jig, and then we're using that ball nose cutter again to put a little bit of a radius in this piece. It's not something that you want completely flat. We kind of just learned that through trial and error. We built one of these chairs the first time and our curve was wrong. It wasn't comfortable. And so we realized we had to introduce a curve to this backrest, and it really just allowed the chair to more so sculpt to your upper back as opposed to hitting your spine on like one flat spot and having all that pressure go into one area. So then once we've got these backrests cleaned up to a point where we're happy with them, we can begin working on the glue up for this. So similar to a lot of the other glue ups you've seen here, we're using Titebond 3. And something I haven't mentioned yet about the joinery that we're using on all these joints is we're not only relying on the wood glue and the joinery, but we're reinforcing everything with wood screws that are going to be hidden behind solid wood plugs. So some of the purists or traditionalists might get mad at the idea of this because we're introducing a different medium into a wooden joint, but it's far, far superior than just relying on the glue. And this way you actually have some mechanical force that's pulling everything together. Here we're doing a similar glue up technique to get the armrests on, but instead of putting a screw through, we just go with the dowel all the way through this. The armrests still need to be strong, but they're not going to experience anywhere near the amount of force that, let's say, the legs or the backrest would. And now we're going along and drilling out for all of the screws on our seat and leg connection. So again, even though we've already got that Maloof style joinery in there, this is essentially like an insurance policy to just make it that much stronger. And all of our plugs, we do our best to get matching grain in them. So if possible, we'll create them with an offcut from the very same board that they're going into, but at the very least, we ensure that they're a matching wood species. And now that everything is glued up, there's no more joinery left to be cut, there's no more screws left to be put in, anything like that. This now all comes down to the craftsman. So right here, Randy is just using an angle grinder to begin roughing out a lot of our joinery connections because nothing on here was a perfect curve or consistent. And it also introduces a challenge that you can't really have multiple craftsmen work on different chairs of the same package because each craftsman is going to have a slightly different way of doing things. So for that final shaping and sculpting of the chairs, it's really important to have that consistency. And in our case, Garrett ended up being the man who sort of took the lead on these and really got a good feel for how to sculpt these chairs. And some of our longtime followers will know Garrett. He did have some controversy a while ago. He had a glue brush stolen from him in a video, and we just want you guys to know that Garrett is doing okay from that incident. He has recovered and he's still happy. So at this point, there's really not a whole lot more that I can add. We're grinding everything to shape, we're going through the grits of sandpaper, and we're taking these up to 320 grit. So we're gonna put some music on, you guys can enjoy the satisfaction, and we'll see you back when these things are ready to get finished. And now, after many, many hours of hand sanding, it's finally time to put the oil finish on these pieces. So as you guys probably guessed, we're using our Black Forest furniture oil on these chairs. And when it comes to a finish choice for chairs, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to use an oil finish. We do offer two finish types when it comes to our tables. There's the urethane and then the oil, obviously. And really the only reason that someone would pick a urethane is for that increased stain resistance that it offers. But chairs are never really going to experience the same kind of liquid exposure that a table might. And the use of an oil finish allows for much more repairability than a sprayed urethane would. And with chairs, it's much more likely that you're going to get some bumps and dings because people are going to be pushing them in, they might hit the table legs, the chairs might hit each other. So to have that ability to really easily touch things up is going to be a huge advantage here. So then once we've got 2 coats of our oil applied, the final step is to add some non-abrasive pads into the bottom. I believe our client has hardwood floor, so obviously we don't want to scratch that. And I think we just got these from Home Depot or something, but they work really, really good. And the final detail that gets added to every Black Forest piece is a little metal badge. So these are cast in solid pewter metal. We had them custom made for us, and they're just a way for people to identify an authentic Black Forest piece.
Well, we're here at Timeless Furniture Corporation today. We're picking up a project that we started some time ago. Thank goodness. Oh, let's start over with that again, Lem. Thank goodness we have a patient customer on this one here. It took us some time, probably a year plus, to get this project finished for this client. We did a door for their beautiful home. We did a big Buckeye burl table. And these, we have 10 sculpted Maloof style connected joinery chairs that we're picking up at Timeless today. Now, there's 2 of them that are ours.
Yeah, I can identify them, just look based
So
on the
you keep
sculpting.
an eye. So then go tight on that side, and I'll give you the other one opposite.
This is the front.
Garrett.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's how we gotta do very much.
Get it. Blanket. Just fold over and just stuff in between or something.
Perfect.
Right.
I'll just take a look at them.
Looks so good.
I guarantee there's like 10 hours of that content directly.
Just you.
Me touching chairs.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
I have to put pads on, right? There's no pads
No,
on.
there's
There's
pads on
pads.
it, screwed in. Not going anywhere.
The colors that like bring out the browns in the burl.
Yeah, the color.
You like them?
I love them.
Oh my god,
I just love that this is the star,
this is nice.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
right? Like it doesn't overpower it.
No.
But when you pull this out, like this has its own beauty.
The colors are really like there's browns in
Yeah.
here and there's the lighter colors in there. Yeah, man, here, Garrett did almost 75% to 80% of all the final sculpting and sanding.
Oh,
and shaking.
nice.
Yeah.
It took hours and hours and
Oh
hours.
yeah. Yeah, these are, I know
They're
each
quite
chair individually.
Yeah, the arms.
Yeah, the way they flow.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
feel good. There's
Yeah.
nothing
Yes,
nicer
the feel.
than feeling like, you know?
If
Like,
you want to hold it.
The tactile part of it,
There's
the
an old-
St. Maloof joinery,
right?
the way that these
Beautiful.
attach to there, yeah.
It's beautiful. Like it's so smooth. I mean, even if we hadn't done the leather, it still would look beautiful,
Yeah.
Every single seat is book matched wood.
right?
Yeah.
But it would have been. But my whole thing was, I went from chairs that were like you could sit in all night at a dinner table,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
just wanted to have that again. That's why I wanted the upholstery, because like, why get up from this beautiful table if you don't have to?
Well, here we are finally in our client's home with all of the chairs delivered. We have to confess, this was a very long time coming. We maybe overestimated the chairs a little bit, I guess, in a way, because of the complexity of them and how much sculpting and shaping went into them. And that was all Garrett. You know, he has formed a bond with each chair. He actually has a name for each chair. That's how close he's gotten with these pieces. But the best news of all is that our client absolutely loved these pieces. She loved the shape of them. She loved the way that the leather tied into the other leather she has featured in the same space. And also, she really complimented the way that when they're pushed up against the table, they just tuck right in and hide, and you can barely even see that they're there. So that's a huge relief for us, and we're just very grateful to our client for trusting us with all of this work. Because to recap, we did the dining table, 10 custom chairs, and then the custom front door that you saw at the beginning of this video. So it's always a pleasure to get to do so much work in clients' homes like this that they're going to spend so much time with. So again, big thank you to them, and thank you to all of you guys who have followed along for these builds. And if you want to go back and watch those other builds for the table and the door, we'll be sure to put those down in the description, but we'll see you in the next one.